digital Circus is out. It's called Candy something Chaos. Candy Carrier Chaos, yeah. I was a little bit confused because it was, Candy Canyon Kingdom is what the location, what the locale is called, but the episode, the actual title is another triple alliteration on the letter C, although Kingdom technically starts with a K. Hold on, I'm just trying to collapse my tripod. I forget how to do it every single time. There we go. But no, it's a different set of alliterative words. So, okay. Does it live up to the hype? We've been waiting since October when the last one came out. Did it live up to the hype? Well, I think that this episode was very good, and it did exactly what I wanted it to do. And one thing that I wanted was for it to kind of advance the sort of existential theme a little bit. Like just add an extra little note to it, an extra little layer, an extra little color to it. And I think that is what it did. So the main kind of existential moment in this episode is pertaining to this new character, Gummy Goo, who is an NPC, and he finds out that he's an NPC, which is kind of a similar situation to what happened to Pomni and all the others, except it's worse, because they at least know that they're human, so they know that there's some amount of reality to their existence. They know that they at least have a certain importance to this digital world. Whereas Gummy Goo is just this AI created program who only exists to be an obstacle and then be forgotten. And so he's having an existential crisis. And then Pomni offers to take him back up with her to the circus. And once she said that, I immediately knew what the ending was gonna be. I knew what the big joke at the end was gonna be, and it played out exactly the way I expected, even down to Kane snapping his fingers like he did in the first episode when he fixed Ragatha's glitching. I knew that what would happen was they would take him into the circus, and then Kane would take one look at him and go, oh, he's not supposed to be here, and he's gone. He's just vanished from existence. Without even thinking, Kane wouldn't even be thinking about how the other characters would react to that. It would just be like, oh, that's not supposed to happen, let me fix that. It would be just a very quick thing for him, but then for Pomni it would be like, oh my god, he's dead! But just because it was predictable, that doesn't mean it was bad. I actually think that it was the obvious choice to do, and it was the right choice to do. It really fit with the whole existential thing that they're going for with this show. And I really loved that. Especially because Gummy Goo is such a likable character. We kind of, in the short time we got to know him, he did make a pretty positive impression. He had a cool voice and everything. And so, yeah, it was predictable, but it was still really cool that they did it that way. There's a part of me that wants to see the version of this show where Gummy Goose sticks around as a main part of the team, because that is an interesting idea. You have a whole team of humans and one NPC, and what's the difference between them? That could yield some interesting ideas. But I like the fact that it kind of gave us this thing that we might have wanted to see, and then it just took it away from us. It's a very, very, I think it was a very smart idea to do that. But we also have, so there's a lot of references in this one. A lot of references to other things like Candy Cane and Kingdom. That whole environment is like very similar to Sugar Rush from Wreck-It Ralph. I mean, very, very similar. And there are other things that did that same idea, like Candyland and stuff. It's a very kind of worn out premise. There's also the Mad Max theme with the tankers chasing each other in order to get, in this it's maple syrup, but in Mad Max it was guzzling, I think is what they called it. And then there's one part where they land in this fudge river, and they meet the fudge, which is, it blew my mind kind of, because it was the Greedy from Raggedy Ann. And it's funny because the only reason I watched Raggedy Ann back in November is because of Digital Circus, because Ragatha reminded me of Raggedy Ann. And so I was like, I should see that movie. I haven't seen that movie yet. So I watched it, and it had that character, the Greedy, which is one of the most amazing Richard Williams sequences. And it's that character that's made out of basically caramel, just liquid caramel. And he's like a whole environment. The whole environment is him. And he's this liquid amorphous thing that is always stuffing there's candy that's floating in him, and he's always stuffing it into his mouth. It's this really creative idea. It yielded a lot of amazing animation. But they do the same concept with this guy. He's the fudge river. He's made out of fudge, and he eats candy. And so that was cool to see that they knew that they were copying Raggedy Ann with Ragatha, and they were like, let's just make this even more obvious by throwing in another Raggedy Ann reference. I kind of like that. And then another movie reference, I guess, was right at the beginning when Pomni has her nightmare. Very similar to the nightmare in Toy Story 2, even down to the character's arm being messed up. Her arm was glitching, like she was about to abstract. And then we see her falling through a dark hole, and there's a light at the top, much like when Woody falls in the trash can in his nightmare, and Andy is looking down from this light at the top of the trash can like, bye, Woody. But in this one, it's interesting, they kind of advanced Pomni's anxiety a little bit, where in the first one it was just like, I'm freaked out that my entire reality has changed and there's nothing I can do about it. And I'm here forever in a place where there's no explanation for how we got here or who we used to be, blah, blah, blah. But in this one, it seems like there's an added element where overnight she was really... What happened to Kaufmo on the previous day really messed her up. What happened to Kaufmo where she saw he abstracted, and then they didn't seem to care. They just kind of moved on like, oh, whatever, Kaufmo's dead. Who cares? You know? I think that really freaked her out. Like, so this is just what we do now. We're just waiting to go insane, and then nobody's gonna even miss us when we're gone. We don't mean anything. Like, what kind of a life is this? Like, who are these people I'm gonna have to spend eternity with? These mental patients who don't have any empathy, who don't have any, like, humanity, because whatever sense of reality that they had has been stripped away from them. And I think that's really kind of the theme of this episode is it's easy to lose sense of the reality of yourself when you are put in this unreal environment. You can actually kind of convince yourself that you are not real, and then that's really scary. And the crazy thing with Gummy Goo is that he isn't real. Or is he? And that's the big question, is we don't know. And that's the big question with, complex AI to the point where it's able to mimic human emotions. I don't know how plausible that is in reality. I know Rob Ager definitely thinks it's implausible. He's made a video about it in the past. But in the theoretical reality where that happens, the question is, would an AI like that actually have a subjective experience of life? Or would it just be mimicking the state of having a subjective experience? Would it just be a completely unconscious creature that has an intelligence based purely on mathematics that has nothing to do with actual emotions and feelings? And if so, how could we ever know? Is there any way we could ever even prove that? I think it would always be kind of uncertain. We wouldn't know. And so that's really the case with Gummy Goo, is we don't know if Gummy Goo has actual sentience or not. And maybe he doesn't even know, because it's when you really start breaking it down like that, it can get really confusing. And when your whole reality is shattered, it can kind of shatter your belief in yourself as a real person. And I think that's the problem that Gummy Goo represented, and kind of his presence there and whatnot gave Pomni a little bit of hope. Like, this guy has it worse than me, so maybe I can relate to him and be his friend. And then he gets immediately taken away from her, and he gets just zapped out of existence. And it's like, it brought her right back to that state of anxiety she was in. But then it was interesting what they did at the end, where they have Kaufmo's funeral, which showed that they didn't forget about Kaufmo. But they just, because of Pomni's arrival into the circus, it kind of delayed the funeral. And then that made her feel better, because it made her feel like, okay, these are people who I can actually maybe build relationships with. They're not just totally jaded and gonna lose their humanity altogether. We can hold on to some reality of our existence. We can hold on to some memory of the humanity that we once had and keep that alive. And that seems to be what they're trying to do with the funeral thing, is kind of pretend that they're still real, and in so doing maintain their reality as long as they can. And so that I guess was an interesting way to resolve that particular problem, that particular idea that was set up at the beginning in the nightmare sequence. Another interesting character in this was Jax, because Jax was mean in the first one, but he seems a little bit more cruel in this episode. And we get a little bit more insight, I think, into what kind of a person he is. And I'm fascinated by him because, you know, I never really took it seriously when people would theorize that Jax would have a villain arc in the series. Because it just didn't seem like that's the direction they were going with him in the first episode. It seemed like, you know, everyone was in the same situation together and they were just coping with it in different ways, and Jax's way of coping with it was resigning to not care about anything or anyone and just living life for his own amusement, because that's what this is. It's some fucking amusement for somebody else. So we might as well kind of turn it around and amuse ourselves while we're stuck here. But this episode kind of adds something, I think, because throughout the episode, he's just a tad bit meaner than he was in the first one. And he's always talking about how he wants to see blood and violence and whatnot, which, okay, makes sense because he's, you know, it's a fake world. It's basically a video game. Like, if I were in a video game like that, I'd be like, yeah, let me kill people. I mean, it doesn't really say much. But then there's a very interesting moment, and it happens very quickly, and it's kind of glossed over. It's toward the end, when they get done with their mission and there was no real violence. There was no opportunity for Jax to really let off some steam. And he's just sitting there on his own, staring into the fudge. And he has this expression on his face that doesn't look like he's joking. And he looks really angry. And he's like, I am incredibly disappointed right now. And that's like, huh. So it makes me think that not only has he resigned to not care about anyone or anything, but he's also developing a certain kind of sadistic malice. Like, he's not okay with this situation. He's angry being in this situation. Like, he feels really hurt by this imprisonment that he's in. And he's resentful, and he's angry at whoever put him in here. And he has like he's starting to develop like a pathological need to take that anger out on somebody or something. And it's developing him into this kind of malicious character. And that's fascinating, because we did kind of see that in the thumbnail. He had a similar weird expression on his face, and I wasn't really sure what to think about that. And then with Kaufmo's funeral, he doesn't participate in the funeral. But not in the Zubul way, where Zubul is just like, yeah, I'm not doing this, I'm checked out. Seems like he was just angry. He was like too mad to even show up. Like this this not getting to fight and kill people really bothered him, because he was really looking forward to this. Like, this is something that was going to be very therapeutic for him and help him get through the next day. and it didn't happen. And so I wonder where they can go with that, because I can't see, like, the whole thing is, you know, you can't really hurt anyone in the circus. He can't hurt any of the humans. And that's kind of why I always thought Jax was so nonchalant and always so cruel, is because he knows that they can't actually be hurt. And so he's like, fuck it, I'll just do whatever I want. So I'm wondering what that means for him if they are kind of pushing him toward a villain arc. Will he actually manage to be efficacious in any way? I mean, he has that thing, that running gag where he somehow has a key to everything. I don't know if that's going to come into play, but he seems to, I don't know if his anger that he's taking out on the NPCs is going to translate to him taking it out on the humans. And if so, how is he going to manage to do that? How is he going to manage to actually hurt any of them? Is he going to actually mastermind a way to hurt these people? I don't know, and he might not be able to, and it might just be this kind of impotence. Like he's the person who wants to be the bad guy, but there's no actual way for him to do it. And so they're just kind of living with him as this sort of fake villain who's not a real villain. I could see a lot of possibilities for this character. But I did find it interesting that they chose to highlight that moment where he's not talking to anyone else. He's talking to himself in the corner by himself, talking about how disappointed he was. Like, that's the kind of thing he would say as a joke, just to rile people up. But in this case, he was like, no, he was serious about it. It seems he was really serious about it. Very interesting. Kinger had some good moments, like when he was throwing things at Pomni during the chase scene, and then when he had the bucket on his head while talking to Ragatha, that was pretty funny. And then he said that Ragatha's hair looked like licorice. That was pretty funny. I was kind of looking forward to more Kinger stuff. Like, I loved Kinger's lines in the first one. Kaufmo has gone through some sort of Kaufmosis and abstracted. Or, Jax, we found the Zooble hole. He had some of the best lines in that. I don't think Gangle got a lot of good moments in this one. Zooble obviously didn't have much to do in this one, but I kind of like that about her, because it's kind of setting up that she'll have more... She'll like maybe have an episode where we really get to see her, and they're kind of keeping her mysterious for now because she's so checked out, and I like that. But I do like that she showed up for Kaufmo's funeral, and so it shows that she's not interested in the fake stuff, but she is interested in the real stuff, like the real humanity of the situation, where they can be reminded that they're real people. She likes that. And it's funny because Jax is the opposite. Jax likes the video gamey stuff. He wants to see a bunch of crazy stuff happen and see funny things happen to people and hurt people. But he's so mad, he's so angry, it seems, that he doesn't want to participate in the more sincere aspects, because maybe he's just lost faith in the reality of his existence, and he's just kind of jaded to it, and he sees that this is sort of like a pathetic attempt for them to hold on to a lie at this point. Which of course feeds into his loneliness, and I see him as a very lonely character, because there's nobody in the circus who's like him. Nobody has a personality that's really cynical like his, except for Zooble, but Zooble is checked out and doesn't like him. Zooble thinks he's an a-hole, doesn't want anything to do with him. And so the one person who might be able to really relate to him doesn't like him, and so he's just this very alone person. And loneliness can be a very corrosive thing. And I can see that really eating away at him over time. Whereas I think the other characters maybe are able to find more connection with each other. Like, I think Gangle and Kinger and Pomni and Ragatha, they can more or less kind of get along with each other, even though they are quite different from each other. They can still probably have some sort of a social life together. But Jax is just kind of, he doesn't relate to any of them. And I can see that being a really lonely situation for him. And that can cause problems. That can really increase resentment and anger and all that. So we're getting some good character development, I think, in these episodes. I think the more we see these characters, the more we're getting out of them, and that's a good sign. It's showing that the series is really working with its premise quite well. We didn't get to see a whole lot of Kane in this episode, or Bubble. I was sad that we didn't get a whole lot of Bubble, because Bubble had some really funny moments, although I liked the part where he said he was quitting smoking. But overall, I think this episode was exactly what I wanted it to be. I mean, in the first one, Kane said we're gonna do a simple in-house adventure, and so I figured, well, in the second one, you better give us an out-of-house adventure. Let's see what happens on other days when we have a lot more interesting things to do, and so this episode definitely provided in that way. Definitely provided kind of the next step. Like we got used to the whole tent life in the first one. Let's see what happens when we go outside the tent. Yeah, I guess that's it. Amazing Digital Circus episode 2, Candy Carrier Chaos, definitely lived up to the hype. Definitely a good follow-up. I have no reason to suspect that the show will not continue in this streak, because it seems like it's going to be a limited run series with a beginning and an end in just a few episodes, which might be smart for something like this, even though I might like to see it go on longer. You know, maybe Gooseworks has something else in the pipeline, some other project that she wants to do, and I'd be interested in seeing whatever she comes up with.